Hi, we are going to go live with Dr. Toomer. I'm inviting her on. All right, and here we
All
are.
right.
Hi, so I am Dr. Elisa Zhang. I am a life coach and ophthalmologist and oculoplastic surgeon, and I coach a lot on money mindset as well as burnout. And we've got Dr. Catherine Toomer. I'll have her introduce herself.
Hello, I am Catherine Toomer. I'm family medicine and community health physician and founder and CEO of Health, Wellness, and Weight Loss Centers.
Awesome. And so Dr. Toomer has an amazing story. And she has started her own practice where she really, works the dream, like practices medicine on her own terms. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that and what it took to get that going. And I'm sure there was a lot of money mindset issues in the beginning.
Yes, and I do have actually a few questions because I actually include a a money mindset component into my program, and
Oh, that's
so
awesome. I didn't know that.
yeah, so I mean, if you want, I can tell my story. I mean, that's that's fine. So, about 20 years ago, after years and years and years of gaining weight, I was morbidly obese. I was an insulin dependent diabetic. And then a month after my daughter was born, I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. And at the time, I was given a 50% chance of living 5 years. Um, and so I thought, well, I can't really do much about my heart. But I knew that I had a toddler and I had a newborn and I needed to do something to get my health in order. But when I sought help, I kept being told I was, did I just lose you for a minute there?
Yeah, you just paused. I think the connection maybe wasn't.
Well, I think what it is, my phone is not, it sees it when I'm inactive, it just shuts down and I didn't turn off that part. Um, so I'll have to fix that, I think. Um, and so, um, And so when I asked for help, I kept being told I was too high risk. And so I thought, well, that's kind of odd because, well, I knew no one was going to tell me to come off insulin. I mean, that's just, no one's going to say that. Just like, let your heart do what it's going to do and we'll figure it out. But with the weight loss, it was kind of odd. I kept wondering, like why would, I would think that a weight loss program would be healthy enough to help someone get healthy. And so when that wasn't the case, I decided I just created my own program, and I kept very detailed records of everything I did. The beautiful thing about diabetes is that it takes one meal to get it under control, and so I started making notes of everything I did. And as a result, I got my diabetes under control, got off insulin, and lost 60 pounds in 6 months. But I had all these notes and things that worked. So when I eventually went back into practice, I started using the same process with my patients, and they were losing weight. And I thought, okay, I have something here. But then I realized there was I use what's called a biopsychosocial system. I could get the biology under control. I could kind of work on the sociology part of it so it didn't affect people's families. But the psychology takes a lot of time. And I didn't have the time to do that. And so I ended up opening my own practice. And so Health, Wellness, and Weight Loss Centers was born. And and then of course COVID hit, and then I had to go uh, virtual. And then, so I ended up online. So now it's 100% virtual instead of um, in my office, which actually helps because that meant I can help people all over the world, which I do now.
Yeah, that's amazing. So before you were practicing, were you an employee?
I worked at FQHCs. I had a National Health Service Corps um, scholarship for medical school. I did that on purpose so that I wouldn't have student loans to come out because I wanted to work with underserved populations. I never expected to get paid much in medicine. And so I just wanted to have that freedom of movement um, and that freedom to just take jobs as I wanted. And so I worked at FQHCs, which is federally qualified health centers. and there were underserved areas. My first job was in my husband's hometown. I had other jobs, and then it seemed every place I wanted to live qualified. And so I was able to, win in every situation. I got to do the
That's
work I
awesome.
wanted to do, which I loved. I got to live in places which I wanted to, I loved. And actually, I was even allowed to um, pay back my obligation working part time because I wanted to preserve my health. I knew that, my congestive heart failure never went away. And so I worked part time to,
Yeah, I was
so
gonna say, was there a point that you couldn't work because of your health issues?
immediately after I was diagnosed, I didn't work. So for like 9 years, I didn't practice. Not
Oh, that's a
official,
long time to
not
not practice.
officially anyway. I mean, people still called me all the time for medical advice, and I kept up on, the latest. I would read, journals and everything. So, um, and when I went back into practice, I was really nervous because I kept telling my husband, I was like, I need to do something to brush up, and he's a radiologist, and he told me that he sees everybody's orders. He talks to every single doctor out there, and he was like, I'm telling you, don't worry, you're still on top of it. He said you won't have a problem.
That's great to have that
Yeah,
support and insight.
and it's true. I mean, I think the only thing that came up is like I didn't know the brand names of certain medications, like the newer medication, and that was it. Everything else is the same. The body didn't change any. Our physiology didn't change. The brand, the types of medications didn't change. Just some of the names I wasn't familiar with, and that was easy to brush up on. So
So then so when you went back, was that when you started your own practice?
no, I actually had to finish my obligation through the National
Okay.
Service Corps because I only had been in practice a year and a half out of a 4-year obligation, and so I went to um, and so I had 5 years left to complete, and so I did that. And even after my obligation was over, I stayed because I liked the work. It was what I wanted to do. But then well, two things happened. One, the hospital across the street from our office, we were in a rural area. We were the one of two primary care offices in the town, and then the other one shut down, which was fine. We just absorbed their patients. But then the hospital across the street closed. And then we became the de facto emergency room, urgent care center, and primary care center. And that just was too much. Um, every day was just constant. I mean, it was just one emergency after another. And, I didn't go into emergency medicine for a reason. Adrenaline is bad for my heart. And so I liked it when I was in med school, but once I was diagnosed, I knew that type of medicine was something I couldn't do. And so I ended up having to leave. I knew it was time for me to figure something else out. And so I found a place with really low overhead, and I created a sort of a hybrid. Um, because my company is health, wellness, and weight loss centers. And so I was helping people lose weight, but I'm still a physician, so health was primary. And but in the wellness also is that I just felt like that was a component that seemed to fall through the cracks. The things that I always say that health is a state of being, but wellness is a state of mind. And it seemed like nobody was paying attention to that component. And so, and it was mine, so I could do whatever I wanted. And which is actually why I wanted to ask you something because I include a financial component because stress is a big issue with people and their issues around food, what their body does with food once they've eaten. And so I focus a lot on what stresses people, and finances is one of them.
Yeah, it's true.
And so
Yeah,
I
money
end
is one
up,
of the biggest stressors that many of us have.
yeah. And so in the program I have, in my group program, I actually have a financial advisor who will do a master class on budgeting and how to get on top of finances and just to help people because it's important. And but sadly though, a lot of us, even as physicians, need it, as you probably
No,
have
I mean,
seen.
honestly, as physicians, we almost need it more because there's this sense that we get in medical school. It's like, oh, you're just going to make enough money as a doctor that it'll always be fine. All the loans that you take, it'll be fine. And
Hmm.
then no one actually teaches you anything about like actually paying off loans, what it means to accumulate all that,
Hmm.
those interest payments, what the different options are, how that affects. I mean, even what you choose as a specialty can be affected
Hmm.
by how much load you have. And the different types of loans. I mean,
Hmm.
some people have subsidized loans, some people have private loans. Like what it means if you consolidate your loans, like what you know, like what consequences can actually come out of that. So
Hmm.
there's actually a lot that goes into it that we're really never talked about.
Yeah.
Um, I have a little bit of a mindset that, in a way, like hospitals probably don't want us to figure this out, so that we're just chained to working for them.
Yeah.
It's another way to keep us, needing the paycheck from the hospital, but then thinking like, they're basically teaching physicians a certain type of like learned helplessness almost. Like you
Hmm.
have to be here for this paycheck because otherwise, how are you going to pay off your loans?
Hmm. I know people talk a lot about predatory lending when it comes to low income, for housing or different things. But nobody mentions it about doctors because it is. We're kind of, because I mean, first of all, we're sort of held captive because um, we have to pay to go to school. I intentionally went to a state school. I went to so that I would have in-state tuition because I didn't want, I wasn't sure if I was going to get the National Service Corps scholarship because you find out right before you start school. So if I didn't get it, I would have been in bad shape if I had to pay out of state tuition. And so all my decisions were so that I didn't owe a lot of money. And it was, but my husband, he's an out of state student. His student loans were just through the roof. It got to the point by the time he was said and done, our mortgage was less than his student loan payments.
Wow.
And he's a radiologist, so we were able to absorb that. But still, if he hadn't been in that type of a field, I
Right, and they talk about not having primary care doctors. Well, you kind of need to compensate primary care doctor a little better when people are taking out $200,000 of loan for med school, right?
exactly, exactly. And so, um, but I'm actually curious when you are working with physicians and not, and about because you do a lot with finance, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, do you find that that's one of the biggest stressors that people have?
Is money?
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, yes. Though honestly, a lot of people who come to me,
Hmm.
burnout is actually almost more of an issue.
Okay.
Um, and burnout is the more of the stressor because it's like I don't know that I can keep working, but I need
Hmm.
to keep working because I need for the money
Hmm.
essentially.
Okay.
And so that's why, you know, I say like I kind of dual coach on both burnout and money in the sense
Hmm.
that I need to coach you through, I need to coach physicians through the burnout so they can continue to earn because for most physicians, even if they have been investing,
Hmm.
their number one, asset is still their ability uh, you know,
Practice.
to practice.
Hmm.
And but also then working on how do you build wealth so that you aren't just tied to your paycheck, so that that
Hmm.
isn't what your primary asset is, so that you can start getting cash flow from other places and
Hmm.
eventually lessen your need to practice. And, you know, that opens up other options like, working less or, going part time or,
Hmm.
potentially not practicing at all if it's really not um, your place. And there's also, of course, non-clinical careers that physicians can move to as well.
Yeah. And I've started doing a little bit of other things besides just working with clients one on one and then now in a group. Mainly because I like writing. I like, that's the beauty though of being a physician is that people like our opinions. They value our opinion. And so having opportunities to, give that opinion in various situations is wonderful. And And now because of COVID and with everything having, before it used to be, well, oh, you'll do this free for exposure, or it was just always we would add credibility to something, but we never get compensated for it. Whereas with COVID, what's happened is that now the expectation is if you expect to be compensated for something that's virtual, no one is surprised anymore. Whereas before that wasn't the case
I
at
know. I
all.
can think of all the phone calls that, made in the past that just are expected. Oh, you're supposed to call the, patient with results, and
Mm-hmm.
this is something that was billable. So, you
Yeah.
try to get them into the office just so that you can bill, which is kind of ridiculous because, um, it's not actually necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, especially now with Zoom.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. In fact, yeah, because I mean, um, been wonderful for me because I still, like I said, I still have a heart condition. I'm still high risk, so there's no way I could see patients, face to face. So having the opportunity and the way things are working, so I can, see people through telemedicine, is great. Um, and even now, it's like every single time, every week, it's like some new bells and whistles are created to make it easier, and so I'm enjoying it. But um but it's interesting though. I could actually interestingly, I think that I overestimated how or I underestimated just how much work it still is. And I realized I was starting to even overextend myself even in the telehealth realm, when and I like, I've never, I mean, I have experienced burnout when I finally had to leave my last job, but I was actually starting to create it for myself, that same pace for
Mhm.
myself even. But then I realized I'm my own boss. I don't have to do this. I can set my own schedule. And that's essentially what I ended up doing, was just setting really strict boundaries for myself. And so my schedule is quite nice, and I can still control it 100%, which I couldn't do working for someone else.
Right. Yeah, and that's you're such an example of, being able to practice on your own terms and how that makes a difference. And that's, you're able to continue to practice because you are doing your own terms for you for a health condition. But
Hmm.
I mean, in a way, burnout is a mental health condition, right?
It is. And I know, I mean, one of the things that when I first was diagnosed with um, congestive heart failure, I had just had a child, so I was suffering from postpartum depression. I just got this devastating diagnosis, so I was suffering from diagnosis depression, and then I probably had some low-level chronic depression already anyway. This is probably functional um, depression, um, for just from, and even if not from before med school, definitely from med school and residency developed. And so that combination just floored me. And so one of the things that happens, if anyone knows a lot about depression, they realize it zaps your motivation. And so I had a 2.5-year old, I had a newborn, and I had no motivation whatsoever to do anything. And so fortunately, I recognized the signs, and so I treated my depression first. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so adamant about the wellness component of my program, because people often are pushing a boulder up a hill because they haven't addressed the thing that's really making it hard for them. They think it's about eating, they think it's about exercise, when really it's about their depression that's gone untreated, or their anxiety that's gone untreated. And so, and I see it a lot in particular people in high stress jobs, which many physicians are,
Hmm.
and they wonder why I do a behavioral health screening for my program. And they're just like, why am I answering? And it's always the last one they want to fill out. I'm like, fill it out honestly and send it to me because I need to know. And but there's such a stigma, and that question we get asked every time we renew our license, about mental health. So people are a little nervous, and but it's important. because I
Yes.
think, especially with the suicide rate in physicians being 3 times higher than the national average, um, it's because we have not addressed that the elephant in the room, essentially.
Yeah, so true. And it's so sad that, physicians, I mean, I don't really personally know anyone who's committed suicide, but there was someone in my hospital, at my
Hmm.
more previous job, that was found in their office,
Mm,
having committed suicide in their office.
yeah, it's just
I mean, I didn't know them personally, but
yeah,
someone
hmm,
close in proximity anyway.
yeah,
And
and I think having COVID just kind of brought it out even more.
I know, and there's
Um,
even been survivor guilt from some. I heard of a physician who, was treating patients with COVID and then finally got COVID, got better from the COVID and was actually okay, and then committed suicide from. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of things going on, but a little bit of
hmm,
survivor guilt, I'm sure, was mixed into all of that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um,
Anyway, so I just want to. So what was the transition from being an employee to an entrepreneur like?
well, it took me a long time before I called myself an entrepreneur. Even though I was working for myself, I called myself a CEO, but I didn't call myself an entrepreneur. That was interesting. Um, but um, it was probably slower than it could be been just because I wouldn't embrace it. Um, but the one thing I did do, and I thought I had some forethought, was, or for foresight, was that I kept my overhead low. I wanted to make sure that I could still practice on my own terms without having to worry about finances. So I made sure that I wouldn't have to see that many patients in order, like my monthly overhead is really low. And then so I think when I started, if I saw 10 patients a month, I would cover everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you manage to keep such low overhead?
Well, partly I live in an area where the cost of living is very low. I didn't have any employees. I was the only person. So it was a micro practice. And the hardest part actually was because I wasn't taking insurance. And so I was able to do that, even though, it took me a while to kind of build up my practice, um, because I didn't have to worry. Now, full disclosure, I also wasn't the primary income in my home either. So I had that freedom. And I had no
Mhm.
student loans. So I had that freedom. So I had a lot of freedom, to create my business. And and also I was farther along in my career. I mean, a lot of times people start their process in their 30s. I was already in my 50s when I did that. I'm 56 years old now, and I started my business 6 years ago. So, it was one of those, probably one of those postmenopausal, um, you know, you know, um, just reinventions, so to speak. But but what I did, actually, the smartest thing I did was I took out a very small business loan, and because even then, even factoring that in, it didn't really um, do much to my overhead. But then I got a business coach, and I don't know if anyone out there is listening knows Dr. Una, but I was actually one of her first clients when she started coaching. And that made all the difference because suddenly I became focused. I had a roadmap, I had a blueprint. And then, of course, now with the EntreMD Business School, I not only have that roadmap and I have a blueprint, I also have a supportive community. So it just makes it really nice and easy to be an entrepreneur now. And it just
Yeah,
rolls off.
community is really
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So question, when you did you lease your office space?
Hmm. And
And
I
how
still
long
am.
of a lease did you sign when you first started?
I think a year. And now
Okay,
it
so
just, it was just, I mean, one of the things that's nice because I'm a physician, he likes having doctors in. It's like kind of a strip, not really a strip mall, but it's like a string of offices, and he likes having doctors in the space because he said it just kind of gives, um, it just kind of makes people a little more comfortable renting some of the other spaces when they know who's next to them is a doctor's office. And so he wasn't really strict about anything other than he was like, I mean, he was just like, you can knock down walls if you want, you can put up walls. But it so happened there was an OBGYN office in there right before I took it over. So all I had to do was paint. But it but he's so flexible with me because he wants me there. And so I haven't even had, I've closed since March 2020. But again, the rent's so low that I've just kept it just in case. I didn't know, what was going
That's
to
so
happen.
awesome.
Yeah.
Because
So
usually commercial places, they want like 3 years, even 5 years to begin with,
mhm,
or yeah. And when you're starting new practice and you have no idea how it's going to work out, I'm
mhm,
sure it can be a little hectic to be signing a 3 or 5 year, lease
mhm.
for an office space.
Yeah, I guess it was 1 year. And like I said, I still have it. Now it's like month to month, I think. It's like just, there's just I have it. And I use it now. I go in there if I want some peace and quiet, I'll go and, or if I need to record and I need, because it's, I have windowless rooms in there. And so if I need, a room where, like I don't want my dog barking in the background, I'll go and use my office. Um,
Do you have any thought of like, I'm going to try this out for, X amount of time before, I decide whether or not it's going to keep going?
um, well, what I just did, I just knew I could pivot, and I've just been pivoting ever since. What my business is now doesn't even closely anything, it doesn't resemble what I started. Um, I was seeing patients one on one. I would see them, once or twice a month. They would come in, and I was sort of like their quasi uh, primary care doctor. So I was doing physicals, but I was also, checking, making sure that they were losing weight because that's mainly why people would come to me. But I would look for the cause of their weight gain, and I would focus on that. And so I was treating. And then, of course, when going virtual, I couldn't do that anymore. I didn't feel comfortable prescribing, not having done a physical exam. And um, so it became more coaching. And then I was doing one-on-one coaching, but then I started, the same amount of time with people, an hour. And so then that one-on-one just wasn't enough. I'm also a community health physician by training, and so I just needed more, and so that's why I created a group. And so, someone asked me, is it a membership or is it a course? And I'm like, it's both because I can do that. It's mine. I can do whatever I want. And so that's what I did. I created a course and a membership. And so um, I just put I digitized my program that I did, and then put that into modules, and then created sort of a wellness component where monthly people come in and they kind of help people build their lives, whatever it is. Any part that I feel interferes with people's well-being, I just have someone come in and talk about it to try to help people overcome that area. So
Now, did you have any mindset issues about charging your patients directly and not taking insurance?
absolutely, it was. I still have that issue. I still have, people who will just like, you never sent me an invoice. Like, oh yeah, you know, I just forget. Um, I did though, I got over that a little bit by automating. So now the way it is that I have things where people pay first and then it just sets off a chain event because, um, but it's still that money conversation is still very difficult for me. That's the hardest part, actually. Everything else is simple.
And what's so hard about it?
I think part of it is I never expected to make money with medicine. Um, I grew up in East Africa, expected to go back to East Africa, actually. I wanted to work out in the middle of nowhere, and I was like, if I get paid in chickens, so be it. I don't care. Um, and so that was part of it. The other is that stigma of doctors are only after money, so it was always hard. And then some of it is just, I came from a family it's like you just don't talk about money. You know, um, you make it and you grow it, but you don't talk about it. And so um, that was it was just I've never had to. I've never been in a situation where I've had to ask people for money for what I was for any service that I gave them. And I felt something that actually Dr. Una said, because I'm like, I'm not a salesperson. I don't know how to um, sell what I do. And she's like, you're not selling, you're offering a service. There's totally different. And when she said that, it became a little easier, but it was still, I still have a hard time. I
You
don't think
talk to
I'll
your
ever
kids
get
about
used to
money?
it. I don't think I'll ever get used to someone handing me money. I prefer for it to be, remote. So I don't have to see it or touch it. It just goes right into my bank account. And I don't mind. Now, I'm not against having it, but I don't mind having it.
Spending it?
Yeah, no guilt in that regard. But um, yeah, I mean, I would work for free. There's some times when things happen, and I just realize, like, wait a minute, I'm doing all this work and I'm not being paid for it, and I have to make myself stop because money is not the first thing in my mind when I do anything.
Well, I think most physicians, at least, when you look at med student, they applications, like,
Hmm.
the first thought is like, you want to help people, right? There's
Hmm.
actually much easier ways to make money than becoming a physician, that's for sure.
Yes, that's for sure. Definitely. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean it is what it is. And I'll probably, well, my ultimate goal is for everything to be passive. So I don't have to do anything except just show up for, you know, coaching and to talk to people and give them advice or talk. Um, Although it's really interesting. I'm really good at negotiating though. Like
How is that?
I don't know. I think maybe because I grew up in a place where there were no prices on anything, and so you had to haggle to get anything. And so that became a game. And so I remember actually negotiating my first contract out of residency, and then in the first meeting, the organization had a meeting, and they actually said in the meeting, we won't be giving out Christmas bonuses because our new hires drove a hard bargain. And I'm just like, of course, there's only me and one other person, so everyone's looking at us like, oh. And but that so my contracts I've always and because I'm very because I had no student my student loans were low, because I wasn't primary breadwinner, I had a lot of freedom, so I could always walk away. And when you have that ability to walk away from an offer, it gives you the freedom to say, this is what I want. If you don't give it to me, bye. And so there are a lot of things, not just with money, but also non-compete clauses. Never signed a contract with a non-compete clause. Um, Now they have intellectual property clauses in contracts. I have those removed too.
Yeah, they say about negotiating, the key is to know what your best next option is. And so if
Hmm.
you've got a good next best option, you can really negotiate hard.
Yeah.
There's also something that I've heard, that women are actually much better negotiating when they're negotiating for somebody else, like for their
Hmm.
family or for an organization. But when they're negotiating for themselves, they don't do so well. But that you put that same woman negotiating for, some quote greater good, then they can actually become fierce negotiators.
Yeah.
Just so interesting to me.
Yeah.
But
That
you
I've
have to be
heard
able
that.
just to even negotiate for yourself, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think it's because, like I said, I watched my mother. It's like we'd go to the market, and it's like you buy a bunch of groceries, vegetables, fruit, whatever, and then she would haggle with the person saying, ah, no, 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 and they'd go back and forth, and that was for everywhere. We buying fish, buying meat, buying bread. Every single place you go, you had, even in the stores, you walk in and buy a shirt. You could negotiate with the person. Hotels. It's like everything. You just haggle for everything, and so I just learned that skill, and so I that for some reason just doesn't bother me though.
Yes, it's funny you mentioned that. So, I love to travel, and my husband and I kind of have this game. So we'll go shopping just for the fun of negotiating sometimes. And so we'll actually see what's in Singapore, so that can
Hmm.
explain why we speak English but
Yeah,
look Asian. And then no one knows what Singapore currency is, so they have no
yeah,
idea like where to start, what's a lot of money to us, what's not. And then we'll just
exactly.
like go at it, and we'll even have like different personas. Like I'll be the like, oh, I want it, but he won't let me. And so you got to bring the price down.
Yeah. Well, sometimes what I'll do, especially like in Kenya where I grew up, and when I go back, I would haggle it down, and then I would just give it more because I figure, they have to make a living. They work, especially if it's something that was made, And I was just like, okay, this would cost 10 times this in the United States, and so sometimes I would just because it was fun. I would just haggle, and then I would still say, "Oh, here, keep the change." I'm still give them more because it wasn't about the money. It was just the game of it, the fun of doing it. But when it comes to contract, that's one thing I have to say. I've always been very, very, very protective of my intellectual property, and that's something I've always through med school, through residency, out of residency. I was very much aware that the information I had was unique. Not everyone could do what I do, and so I just felt like that needed to be respected. And so I just had no problem with negotiating in that regard. Um, and so, and interestingly, and this is something that just a social commentary for the United States, I would do my negotiating over the phone. Most times when I signed a contract, the contract was settled before they saw me.
Interesting. So you didn't
Yeah,
ever negotiate in person. It was mostly on the phone.
always on the phone. And one of my jobs, I walked in, and the CEO I had been negotiating with, her jaw dropped, and she was just like, "I just assumed you were blonde with blue eyes." And I thought, that's exactly why I negotiate over the phone, because it does affect. That also affects people, women, minorities. It affects our bottom line and what people are willing to pay us. And so one of the unfortunate um, tools that I use is I negotiate before people know my race.
Yeah. No, it's true. Actually, one thing I did find out about being Asian is that Asian women actually tend to do better than white women
Really, when it comes to the
when it comes
offers.
to the gender pay gap among physician women.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'm necessarily the best negotiator when it's come to my personal negotiations in the past, but
hmm
yeah, so African American or Black,
hmm
Hispanic definitely have a lower or have a higher pay gap
hmm
compared to
other
Caucasian white
people.
people.
I do want to say hi to my friend Bongile, who's watching from Swaziland. So I just want to say hi. My family lived in Swaziland for a little while after we lived in Kenya, so I've known her for many years, and she's listening right now. So I just
So
wanted to
another
say hi.
question, so like have you ever had any patient try to negotiate with you over the price you were charging them?
I have,
And then how's your
and
negotiating when that happens?
now that was different because I was trying to help somebody. So when they say, I really want your help, but I can't afford you. So I would figure something out. Like say, okay, well, instead of seeing me every single, week, then, we'll see me every other week and then I'll charge you half. Or see you once a month and I'll charge you a quarter. That I would do that. Um, but then what I realized is that for me personally, I don't know how to cut my time in half, and I don't know how to cut my time into a quarter. So I realized that people are still getting 100% from me, and so I
They were
had to
just
stop.
getting along to
Yeah,
visit when they
so
came.
I had to stop doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
And really they should be paying for results, right? Not for time.
Well, and true, and However, the results were slower because people
Because it
often
was
came
just
to me because they came for weight loss usually. Um, and one of the things I realized is people are very um, they'll come see me for weight loss. They don't care about their health much, and so they'll I rarely prescribe weight loss medication. I'll prescribe medication that helps people lose weight, but it's not a weight loss medication. And so it's often I've had to, really um, convince someone that it was going to work because they wanted a pill that make drop their appetite, or they want, it's like, yes, they work temporarily, but that's really not the best thing for you. And so, or people would want a pill for weight loss, but then I tell them, you're diabetic, so if you just treat your diabetes, your weight kind of will go away. But they won't take the medicine for diabetes. They just went. I was like, okay. It just sometimes it had made no sense. But yeah, I've gotten better. Um, One of the things that actually Dr. Una said is your business is your child, and your money is how it's fed. So are you going to starve your child? And I was like, no. And so I've gotten better at um, just walking away from people when they're like, oh, that's too much. Okay, well, you know, I know what I do is unique. I know what I do is effective. I know what I do gives people results. And if they don't value what I do, I can't make them. And if they don't prioritize their health and their wellness, over other things, I can't make them. And so I've gotten a little harder in that regard.
do you think that gives you kind of a different quality of patient?
Definitely. It's interesting. It's kind of shaking out where I have patients who are now like me. They're older physician women mostly. Even though that's not, I didn't, I don't, that's not my niche necessarily, but that is what's kind of shaken out because physician women who are older get it. They just know, they're like, yeah. And they also are at a point where there's like, you turned your health around. I need this. And they value what I bring to the table. And and I find that also in the coaching arena, sometimes people seek out coaches so they can blame someone when they don't get the results they want. And
Oh,
I can
interesting.
sense that, yeah. And so they're not going to pay somebody for that.
Mhm.
They want to get that for free. So so and I can
Well, that's
spot
what they
them.
say. The transformation is in the transaction, right?
Yeah. So I just but I've gotten, like I said, I've gotten very much better at that. Much better.
So how
Um,
long have you had your own practice now?
well, I officially started my LLC. It became, I guess, incorporated June 6th, 2016. So almost 6 years. And then
Wow.
I really put in like full on effort starting like around January 2017.
And have you
And
raised your prices over that time?
no, I have, and I've changed what I do, so it's kind of changed a little bit. Before it was, I had more. It was like a concierge or direct pay, so people would just pay a certain amount every single month, and they would just come in and see me, and that would be it. But then when I went, virtual, it had to change that, um, and then because I found it wasn't sustainable, and so now I do what would be, I guess, termed executive coaching. So I have my executive coaching and then I have my group coaching. And because I have to have, there's still that part of me that's like, I need to be accessible. I have to have something that's accessible. And so I do have a program where people can pay as little as $100 a month and they still get some of what they get, the program, and then they get some of my magic thrown in there from time to time because I just can't walk away from that. It's just, um, I went into family medicine and community health because of, I saw the disparity in medicine because of the economic disparity. And I just didn't feel comfortable being in that realm.
Do
So,
you have any staff now?
no, oh, I have virtual staff. I have some staff. I have someone I work with from India who's a course designer. Although that's not what I hired her for at first, and then I realized she had these wonderful other skills, and so I I looked out there. I have a VA who a virtual assistant who helps me, and we meet 3 times a week, and she does a lot, and it works out really well. And I mean, eventually I'll start adding more people. Like I'll probably end up having to add a Kajabi specialist because I do a lot of stuff on Kajabi, mainly because I like it. It's so much fun, but I need to stop. It's not a good use of my time. And then I hired my daughter temporarily for my social media, who she'll still do my graphics. She's wonderful at graphics. She still does my photography, so she's taken all my professional photos, and but that's inconsistent. So yeah, she doesn't like being my employee. She's like, just pay me when I do some work, but I'm not, I'm not going to do this regularly. And then, so, that was actually the hardest part for me is delegating. I like being
Yes. What
alone.
was it like the first time you actually hired someone and delegated some work?
Well, I hired someone when I first opened my office, and that lasted about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So I ended up having to let her go. Um, And then I was by myself and I loved it. I liked being alone. So sitting in my office in a quiet office by myself was perfect. And so I didn't hire anybody else until I went virtual. So that so I'm still alone, sitting in my sitting at home by myself. And so it's perfect. It's just, having virtual assistants and virtual people is perfect for me. Perfect.
Do you have any other questions for me?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, you're asking me so many questions. I was like, oh wait, I wanted to ask you, but so do you only work with physicians in your burnout for burnout?
So far, I've only worked with physicians. I mean, I'd be open to working with other professionals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, at this point, it's only physicians who come to me. And in my marketing, I kind of target physicians. And part of that is just in being a physician, I
Mm-hmm.
understand what, the position of a physician is. I
Mm-hmm.
experienced burnout myself. And so I know, like, how that comes to be as a physician. Now, of course, people face burnout in other professions as well.
Yeah.
Um, sometimes I think it's a little different for us physicians,
Yeah.
but it's still probably a similar issue. I mean, for me, honestly, the burnout wasn't about like number of hours worked or even about like, charting at home or bringing it at home. It was really a lot about just lack of autonomy and
Mm.
control.
Yeah. Oh, that was going to actually be my next question. What was probably the one thing that you saw that tended to cause the burnout more than anything else? And
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of positions, I think it is,
mm-hmm.
somewhat the hours worked and charting at home. And I mean, I was actually on call 24/7,
Mm-hmm.
which may have contributed somewhat, but actually, I don't think it was, I mean, I don't really think it was that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because the call wasn't necessarily that busy or that bad.
Mm-hmm.
But it was actually more conversations I had with my superior about how she wanted me to take that call,
Yeah.
which um, was, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
was not what was agreed upon when I took the job.
Good
Let's say
job.
that.
Yeah. And then it's like your time's not quite your own. It's like you have this it's like this nagging feeling you could start something and you could be interrupted at any moment, you know?
Yeah, you get over that when it's 24/7. I mean, I was
Really?
literally on like vacation in a different state and I get called. And it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not rushing back to do anything, so you guys are gonna
Yeah.
have to manage and I can answer questions until then.
Yeah.
So
I, for me, it was actually my children. It was hard because they would give me this look like, like you knew, your mom's a doctor, so, what am I supposed to do? But interesting.
I do have the most amazing of husbands who is totally you know, he never gives me a hard time unless he's just, poking fun at me.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Because actually, I think that has a lot to do with some people, just a lack of support. Um, and it's either lack of support at home or lack of support at work. And if you have a combination of the two, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to be of the most supportive husband I could ask for.
Well, that's good. So do you find that as people move up into leadership positions that that feeling of lack of control goes away, or does it actually get worse because they're really seeing that they have no power?
I've coached a chief medical officer actually.
Okay.
And there's still a lack of control because
Hmm.
you can't you can only control what you do. You can't control what other people do. You can't control what other people think,
Yeah.
and and yeah, so it doesn't matter kind of where you are on the totem pole. There's
Yeah.
still going to be things you can't control.
Interesting. So if someone were feeling like they don't have control, and is it more changing jobs, or is it just changing something within their job that you find is most effective?
Really, the first thing is really changing that mindset. You can only
Mm-hmm.
control what you do, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the only thing you can control. And within that realm, what can you control? Like
Yeah.
what is that, looking at what's around you, what can you control, and looking at what you can't control and just letting that go. And
Mm-hmm.
actually that shift in mindset is actually
Mm-hmm.
the biggest thing that someone needs. It's just
Interesting.
recognizing what's in their control, what's out of their control, what they can do, what they
What
can't
they
do.
can't do.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually something I always tell my patients. I said, just become a walking serenity prayer. It's like control the things you can, and then just know the difference between the things you can and cannot control. But yeah, um, actually, I take that advice for myself as well. Since stress is my enemy, and so I'm constantly looking for ways to de-stress and helping other people de-stress. And I've gotten very, very good at the little nuances of things that can make a difference. And which is interesting because I think that I get people looking at me sideways when I say, I start asking them, how did you organize your closet? Did you do? And they're like, what does that have to do with weight loss? I said, you felt good about it though, didn't you? We talked about it. And so, I often I would, my recommendations would have nothing to do with food, and that's always kind of floors people, but it's fun. And I know I'm going off topic, but anyway, it's been about an hour. But well, this has actually been quite fun.
Yeah, this is an amazing conversation. Thanks for coming on with me.
Yeah, yeah, we should do this again. We should definitely do this again. And
Awesome.
so, because I know there are a lot of people out there, and I know that's what's going to happen is people are just like, how can they contact you? If they, because I just know that there's going to be people listening, and because I'm going to repost all this, who are going to say,
Yep.
I need help now.
Yeah, so my website is www.growyourwealthymindset.com.
Okay,
And you can go there, set up a consultation call with me. It's right on the homepage.
okay,
Sign up for my email list. I also have a freebie where it's a financial independence workbook.
okay,
So you can actually sit and calculate what it would take for you financially to get to financial independence. And it kind of
okay,
goes step by step through that. So that's something you can find on my website. I'm on Instagram at the handle growyourwealthymindset.com. You can
okay,
also find me on Facebook. My name on Facebook is Elisa, Elisa, which is short for Elizabeth, which is my legal first name. And my last
hmm,
name is Chiang, though it's pronounced Jung as if the CH were a J.
yeah,
And if I were to immigrate to the United States now, that would be how it's spelled.
probably be spelled. Okay. Oh, okay. And I'll just tell people you can find me. I'm Catherine Harmon Toomer everywhere. So you can just, you know, um, and I actually am the only Catherine Harmon Toomer MD on Google.
Oh, that's great.
I
Yeah, there's
know.
actually another Dr. Elizabeth Jung, who is a psychiatrist in Arizona. So I am not
Okay.
the only.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, there's other Catherine Toomers, but the Harmon is what kind of makes it
Mhm.
all three names. So okay. Well, thank you for having me on. This is actually, I'm
Yeah,
glad you suggested it. This was great. We gotta do it
yeah. Thanks
again.
for joining me so much. We'll definitely find some other time to do this.
Okay.
All right, and thanks for everyone who joined us tonight.
I see. when names are all together, I see Andrea. I know I can figure that one out. Andrea and Mongile, but I'm the coaching. I'm trying to figure out. My eyesight's too bad. I don't have my glasses on, so I'm like,
I know, you
I
get
don't
kind
even
of
know
lost
why I
scrolling
tried to
through a
read.
whole
But
bunch of
yeah,
people.
thank you guys for for coming in and listening and um, making comments.
All right, good night.
Good night.